Oh, so the draft was long gone. So I
Yeah.
went in August 1986, actually.
Okay, interesting.
I volunteered.
Yeah, I guess what kind of inspired that? What really got you set down?
A few things. I mean, family members, great grandfather, grandfather, uncle, my father, everybody serves. I felt compelled to do the same out of a sense of duty.
Yeah.
And also, the Army was offering about $20,000 to go to college.
There you
So,
go.
I mean, that didn't hurt either. My grandfather was pretty concerned because the world was becoming less stable.
Mm-hmm.
I went from Fort Jackson, South Carolina to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and then Fort Knox, Kentucky. That was my permanent duty station. And then I spent some time at Fort Polk. And then inside the country, we trained at National Training Center in California, also Fort Bliss, Texas. Actually, my first unit, I was in the 4th of the 54th Infantry. I was attached to the infantry unit, and they retired the colors for that unit because it was the all African American unit from World War I, maybe, or even back into the 1800s. So the 54th Infantry, that particular unit, the colors were retired, so we became the 4th of the 15th Infantry. Then I spent some time with 5th Signal at Fort Polk, which is now Fort Johnson. Then I went in the National Guard when I got out and went to college. And believe it or not, I traveled more in the Guard than I did on active duty outside the country. So we did EOD training in Norway. We went to Italy for similar training during the Balkan War to support what was going on there. And all these are about 3 weeks or so, give or take. The first trip out of the country actually was to Honduras, and then Panama and Italy in 1 year, and then Norway and Iceland. We were scheduled to go to Jordan during the first Gulf War, but it ended so fast that they told us to stand down.
How long were you in the Army?
Total 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so I guess over those 10 years, what would you say is like the most significant memory you had? Why has that stuck with you?
the camaraderie, you can't find it in the civilian world. It doesn't exist. In the military, even if you don't like the person next to you personally, you're still professional enough knowing that person has your back. And I kind of wish we had that in real life, in civilian life. It has to be in a situation where there's a lot to lose. And in the military, obviously, you could go to war, and you're training for war. So that camaraderie I've not found.
How would you say your time with the Army kind of influenced your decision to go into social studies education now?
I mean, I've been learning what I'm teaching my whole life, so I kind of tripped into this. I met Miss McCann. I was meeting some friends for dinner, and Miss McCann and her husband were there. She asked me what my master's degree was in, and I told her. And she said, I have a class I want you to teach.
Okay.
And I said, me, be a teacher? I don't think so. That's what I was thinking, but I was open to it. I said, let me see what she has to offer, and here I sit 10 years later. So.
And what was your master's in?
It's Masters of Homeland Security.
How would you say your time in service impacted your worldview today?
Just in service, I mean, a lot of people kind of look at me funny when I say this, but when you go into the Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force, you're training for war. This is not the movies. You realize what's at stake. There are troops that die all the time in training, and being raised by my grandparents, it gave me a very serious approach to life. I mean, you took my class. My favorite drink is reality.
Yeah.
And that comes from way back. And I think it molded me. Sometimes I'm probably a little too serious and overthink things. And I think teaching has helped me with that because you guys keep me in stitches at least once a week. So
You're a very pragmatic person. You're a very serious person.
I should probably relax a little bit. But I mean, that's where it comes from.
Would you say that your experience in the Army and I guess the National Guard as well was more about as challenging as you expected?
Interesting you asked that. I was a communications expert thinking I was going to go and hang out with all this cool equipment. And so when I got to the Army, obviously you get through boot camp, it's a mind game, nothing more. And when I went to training, I'm like, okay, this is where the fun stuff takes place, the good stuff. And when the bus pulled up at Fort Gordon and all the other soldiers were getting off and the barracks were nice, and we went out into what I would consider the woods, and there's a place called Brim's Barracks. And it said Special Forces, Ranger, Airborne Ranger, all on the PT stands. And I'm like, but we're after this. And the drill sergeants get on the bus and start screaming and yelling. It was like being back in boot camp, but worse. I look back on it, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but it was rough.
Yeah.
And it was nothing like I thought it would be.
So many people see so many movies and they think, oh, it's going to be like Band of Brothers. It is training for war. It's a very, very serious thing.
Band of Brothers, they didn't plan that. You know what I mean? That came out of necessity. Even people trained in the military today, we can't even fathom what that was like.
No. Would you re-enlist?
Yes.
You would?
If the country needed me, I'd go back tomorrow. When they start calling my age back, we're in trouble. We need more young men like you.
Yeah.
But I would, if they needed me, I'd go back in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So no problem.
Do you have any regrets about your time with the military?
None.
None.
None whatsoever. Joining the military is one of the greatest things I ever did. It made me grow up faster. There's not a lot of maturation out there right now. There's a lot of outlets for immaturity, and that only comes when you're tested.
Well, you heard it here first. Thank you, Mr. Patty,
You're welcome.
for doing this interview.
You're very welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
happy
You're
Veterans
welcome.
Day week.
No, sure. Thank you. Okay.